naturalist coming from the Kelleys Island ferry, heading out to Kelleys Island for a couple days. So, see you out there. It's awfully windy out here. But the ferry that we need to take to get out to Kelleys Island, and the distance there, take us about 20 minutes. So here's your view as you head on out. It's windy, big waves today. Turned into a quite nice day here on Sunday, late June. Out in the distance from us there is an island called South Bass Island. It has a party place called Putin Bay. We're heading to Kelleys ahead of us. We're about halfway through our journey. It's bouncy out here. I feel like we're on the Edmund Fitzgerald right now. Of course, we're on Lake Erie, and these waves can reach 3, 4, 5 feet. They're somewhere in that vicinity today. There's the amusement park Cedar Point out in the distance, far distance there, back on the mainland. And this is Lake Erie heading pointing east. And then we're approaching Kelleys Island out to our north. I'm on a small ferry. There are 2 ferries that carry vehicles and passengers. I think this is the smaller of the 2. They basically run continuously most of the day until at some point at night they stop. Just shuttling folks back and forth and vehicles back and forth from the mainland to Kelleys Island. Our goal is immediately ahead of us. We'll be there in about 10 minutes. So I'll catch you on the island. Hey everybody, it's Don. Today I'm coming to you from Kelleys Island, and we're going to start our journey here on the island at the famous glacial grooves. This is a national natural landmark, and it is one of the key things to see when you come to Kelleys Island, because it's quite likely you've not seen anything like this anywhere else. And this site attests to the glacial history of Ohio in this area, and in this one big block of limestone that we're going to take a look at. Okay, so let's take a walk around the Glacial Grooves National Natural Landmark. So I'm here on a beautiful day. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning. I beat everybody over here. And when you get to this preserve, there's your requisite signage. Okay, it tells you about the glacial history of this area. Okay, these limestones go back about 400 million years ago. All right, these blocks of limestone were the beds of ancient seas. Okay, they're full of fossils, shells, corals, what have you. Okay, and this island is about 4.5 square miles. And it's been occupied by people for a long time, Native Americans first, but, you know, European settlers going back about 300 years or so started to use this island. One of the things they started to do with this island is quarry the island. This island is essentially a big block of limestone. When they were actively quarrying this island, they uncovered something really cool here, these glacial grooves. So we're going to take a look at this. This has all been newly redone, by the way, these walkways, this railing and so forth. But here's our big reveal of the glacial grooves if you've never been here before. Okay, check this out. Okay, this is about a, I don't know, a couple 100-foot long stretch of this gouged out limestone in these long, sinuous, smooth grooves. It's groovy. And these things were, basically they quarried all over this area. Okay, there was a quarry that came right up to the edge of this site. Okay, just down below where we are. This was all quarried right up to the border of this site. But when they hit this spot, they decided to preserve it, okay, fortunately, and not continue to quarry this all out. So there was an effort, I think going back into the late 1700s, early 1800s, to protect this. And then later it was developed into a park or a preserve and dug out. Okay, this all would have been filled with soil. It had to be revealed, so to speak. So, you know, that effort took, I don't know how long that effort took, but it's really a unique and interesting spot. And probably the thing that Kelleys Island is most known for. This is a textbook site from the state of Ohio. Okay, kind of like our Serpent Mound as well. So the question is, how did these grooves get formed? Okay, well, the idea is that at one point, you know, 15,000 years ago, there was a mile thick glacier on top of this rock. And, you know, there's still a lot of debate about it, but some people thought, you know, these grooves were gouged out by boulders that the bottom of that glacier was dragging, that were caught in the ice, that it dragged across this limestone. And, but because of the sinuosity and the, you know, the flowing type patterns, it's hard to imagine being gouged out by boulders, in my view. I think what the better theory is, I think the leading theory, is that this was all gouged out by meltwater. As the glacier started to retreat and melt, there was water underneath these glaciers melting and flowing. And that water was under extreme pressure. You know, imagine a mile thick layer of ice on top of it. So essentially that water was like a cutting tool. Okay, and it gouged out this limestone with, you know, high pressure water, of course carrying sediments and everything. So it's filled with grit. And so it basically gouged out these tunnels, these channels, as the glacier melted and retreated. Okay, so you can only imagine how long these, you know, these grooves went. Okay, they've all been broken away and taken away at this point, but at least this stretch was preserved. All right, so let's take a look. Yeah, this is all really nicely redone now. There used to be just a little simple walk around here. Now it's all paved with good railing. And here's a little point that gets you out to show you that just below us here was a quarry. You can walk down around this area. Okay, so that was all quarried below us. The other thing people did on this island is harvest cedar, red cedars. Okay, which are obviously still grow here, but they would have been much larger then. Okay, for their timber. And I see this has been replanted. There's some prairie black-eyed Susans, some grasses and so forth coming along here. All right, so there's some really nice signage. Okay, here's a block you can get up close to and personal with. There's fossils in there. I see some fossilized shells right there. Okay, again, 400 million years ago, these rocks were laid down at the bottom of an ancient seabed. Okay, that's basically covered a great deal of western Ohio. Okay, a little bit more signage here. Okay, but it's a great day. It's supposed to be about 80 degrees. We had a nice little shower this morning, just enough to clean things up. And I'm staying at the State Park Campground, which is just adjacent to this preserve. A little bit more signage about what you could find here. Okay, trilobites, various organisms, crinoids, cephalopods. All right, again, the sort of the holy grail in Ohio is to find a trilobite. Okay, one of the largest trilobites ever discovered was found in Ohio. I think it's in the Smithsonian. We have some cottonwoods growing around the border here. We'll scale this a little bit. Here's a little view from up here. Okay, you can see how the scours are sort of very sinuous and twisted. You just can't imagine that boulders could carve patterns like that, essentially. So, if you get out to these preserves nice and early, you get them to yourself. It's not even that early. It's about 8:40 at the moment. We'll take a little look from the top end. Here's a little bit about quarry operations. Okay, so this limestone was quarried both for the rock itself to use in building and so forth, but also to crush and make cement and lime out of it. There you can see the rocks. Now that exposed limestone, thin-soiled terrain does provide habitat for some rare species. And later today we're going to visit a spot where there's an endangered species called the lakeside daisy, actually profiled right here on this plaque, that grows on, you know, these kind of abandoned quarry sites, but grew naturally on areas of beach and things where the rock was exposed. It was very rocky with thin soils. This lakeside daisy would thrive in places like that. So I think it's past flowering, but we'll see if we can find at least some of the vegetative parts of the daisies today. Okay, but could you imagine quarrying this area and encountering something like this? What's kind of sad, I guess, is that they still quarried a big chunk of it. Okay, but fortunately, people did decide to preserve it. Here's a look from the top end. Okay. I love this site. Now what I see they have laid out here, these are placed on display. I've talked about these things at various sites throughout Ohio, but these are glacial erratics. Okay, these are chunks of granite that came from Canada, essentially. These rocks would have been carried by the glaciers and might have been responsible for some of the carving in there. But again, that's not the leading theory at the moment. So, you know, all these pink and gray and crystalline rocks, you see them scattered all throughout western Ohio, anywhere it's been glaciated. Okay, here's a little bit about the glacial erratics. All right. Here, basically, it says it was not till the 1970s where they really exposed these grooves. Okay, right now it's 396 feet in length, 15 feet deep, 34 feet wide. It's It's really been made really accessible at this point. Okay, here's a bit about the formation, which I've talked to you about plenty. So, what else do you see? Very common tree species on Kelleys Island are cottonwoods, like I had mentioned, across the way there. Hackberries are very common. Hackberries grow everywhere. These red cedars, red maples, sugar maples. Okay, these are very common species here. Okay, here's just a nice view across. Okay, and that's the glacial grooves. So I'm going to hit 3 or 4 other highlights today on Kelleys Island and show you what there is to see here. Our next goal is to take the North Shore Loop Trail and visit some of the Alvar communities out on the lake shore in the north end of the island. So let's go take a walk just to show you where we are. We're located about right here. Okay, so there's a state park in this vicinity where I'm staying. The Glacial Grooves is just right next door to where we are. And then we're going to take a walk out here. That's about a mile trail or so. And get out to the lake shore here and try to find some of these Alvar communities. So let's go. One thing you pass by right away on this North Shore Trail is this old building. Okay, and these were buildings associated with the quarrying industry here. Okay, so we're right next to the lake shore, just out in the distance there. And these buildings would have been places where they accumulated the limestone. I don't know if these were crushers or loaders, but this is where they would prepare and load the limestone to set sail. Okay, and these are in some state of disrepair. I think they're still pretty sturdy, but they're of course made out of concrete and stone, these buildings. Here's a beautiful patch of wildflowers though. It's filled with milkweeds. Just awesome. This is like a monarch way station if I've ever seen one. The intoxicating scent of these milkweeds is just fantastic. Okay, these flowers are delicious. Interestingly, you can eat those flowers. You can eat the flowers of milkweed. This is common milkweed. And they're filled with nectar. So you can actually collect these flowers and saute them. I've never done this, but they're supposed to be delicious. Here's another milkweed. This one's commonly called butterfly weed. And this is a milkweed that does not make a milky sap. So unlike its relatives, if you break a leaf off, there is no milky sap that will come out of the broken stems or broken leaves, unlike milkweed itself. So I'll do that here in the name of science. Okay, there's our milky latex, which again is defensive against insects and mammals and things. Okay, this is a beautiful patch. Ah, it's just amazing. Beautiful patch of milkweeds. All right, so I don't see any monarchs at the moment, but I do see some milkweed beetles. Okay, there's one over there. That's a specialist beetle on these plants. And a lot of the specialists that are on milkweed are orange and black, which is interesting. Okay, they all develop toxicity as a result of feeding on these plants, and they advertise it. That's called aposematic coloration. They advertise the fact that they're toxic, so things won't eat them. Okay, here's a few mating on that flower. Okay, so let's move along, but that's a beautiful little spot. As you walk out to the Alvars, you basically walk through a nice patch of second growth forest. Essentially, this island throughout its history would have been completely denuded of trees. And so basically everything you see here has regrown in the past 100 years. or so. And the biggest trees on the island at the moment are probably these cottonwoods, okay, which grow fast. There's a sizable tree right there. There really aren't many oaks left or anything like that. Those were priority and would not have regenerated very well. But what you're left with is, again, a lot of these cottonwoods, formerly ash trees, hackberries, sweet black cherries. What else am I seeing? Red maples, those sorts of things. But yeah, there's a number of large cottonwoods. Again, these are our wetland-loving trees, grow very fast, get very large. And so, you know, it's a quite pleasant hike. I could see that there was some huge wind throw along this section over here. It's really interesting. It just laid down a lot of the trees against this bank up here. So, yeah, parts of Kelleys Island were farmed. You know, there are still vestiges of a few farms. There were still some cattle on this island when I started coming here almost 25 years ago, but I haven't seen them on the island for a long time now. So there's really no more farming. There's a few vineyards. There would have been vegetable farms, the timbering, but also, of course, the quarrying operations. That was the key economy of this island. And then throughout the 1900s, later 1900s, it became mostly a tourist island, which it is now. So let's take a little jaunt. We're almost to the lake shore here. And see if we can get out and see some of these alvar communities. But again, here's some of this. Just would have been massive wind throw coming from the north. Really blew down a huge number of trees. Feel the wind picking up. It's an absolutely beautiful day. We had a huge hot streak in Ohio in the mid-90s for days this past week. So it's nice that that weather is kind of broken. Okay, so here we go. Let's get out here to the lake shore. The lake was angry yesterday. It was windy, cloudy, and so a rain storm came through. So it's still kind of wavy out there. Here we go. This is the northeast shore of Kelleys Island. Okay, and in this section of the preserve, there's no development, no camping, no houses or anything right along this stretch. So this is it's a beautiful spot. Campground back in that direction. And all this rocky lakeshore you're seeing here is called alvar. And it selects for certain kinds of species that can grow in these little nooks and crannies, including the lakeside daisy, okay, which we'll try to find. If I can confirm it, I'll show it to you specifically. But again, mostly exposed limestone, thin soil, some wave action, of course. You know, this would get hit with waves, water and ice, and so forth. So you got to be a hardy plant to make it in these kinds of communities. All right. Just a beautiful spot. Okay, so those are alvars. In this spot, I noticed a little glacial groove. You can see on this alvar, right here. All right, so that's basically in small scale what I just showed you at the Glacial Grooves National Natural Landmark. There probably would have been, you know, an infinite number of these things around here that have eroded with time. or are under the soil at this point. Okay, but that's an exposed one out here. I walked down the shore a little bit to a little rocky beach here now with more alvar community out in the distance. I see some ducks out here. I think they're mallards. But this beach is made up of lake stones, rounded lake stone. Okay, so, and that stuff forms basically from broken limestone by that. Okay, this just gives you an idea how wavy it can get. This is Lake Erie. This isn't our biggest lake by far, but when the winds pick up, it can get quite wavy. People may or may not know that on Lake Michigan, for example, on the eastern side of Lake Michigan, you can surf. Okay, we're not talking about Hawaii type waves, but you can get up to 4-foot waves, 4 or 5-foot waves. These are 2 or 3 feet maybe, and maybe a beginner wave, but it's interesting when you look at the construction of the buildings on this island and so forth. You see some of the older ones are built out of cut limestone, but there are a few that are built or sided with lake stone as well, just rounded lake stone. And you see some structures built out of this stuff. You can see all kinds of different compositions. Okay, this would be our limestone, 400 million year old limestone, but then this is likely to be more the granite. Okay, or these kinds of stones. All right, so there's all kinds of stuff in there. It's really interesting. Different colors. There's a more pinkish stone. Here's a dead fish carcass. Doesn't smell too good. Looks like it was a carp. Let's just walk our way back. Here's a downed hackberry. See, now here we're back on the hard alvar surface from the rounded stone beach. A little bit more parkour. Here's willow. Okay, you often see willows on lake shores or river sides. It's just like a paved surface here. Right over here I noticed that there's a nice round glacial erratic sitting right on the alvar over here. This thing, that's a chunk of granite sitting here, perched on the limestone. Lake Erie is an important fishery. Of course, Lake Erie is known for its walleye and yellow perch, but there are salmon in there. There's probably lake trout. And you know, the numbers of these things fluctuate quite a bit. There are big years, bad years. Of course, Lake Erie has been invaded by lots of different invasive species like the zebra mussel or the goby, which is an invasive fish. But it's home, this island is home to a number of rare species like the lakeside daisy, and which is past its flowering, so I haven't seen any of those. But also a Lake Erie water snake, I think has recently been taken off the endangered species list. They're pretty common to see along the lake shore. But there are otters. You can see otters playing here. I see a cormorant out in the water right there. So it's a really unique little habitat. Well folks, right on cue, here's a Lake Erie water snake. It's about 5 feet in front of me. I'm going to try to get the camera as close as possible so you can see this thing. It's not completely excited that I'm here, but it's not too scared. Okay, so that's a Lake Erie water snake. These things obviously swim. They mostly eat fish. So it's kind of fun to watch them dive and come up with these invasive fish, these gobies. So I'm gonna get a little close. He's wary, but I could see that it was wet. It just came out of the water. And it's out here to warm up. Go ahead. Just gonna get a look at you. Well, what the heck? Let's watch you swim. Oh, you just came out of there. I'll give you a break. Beautiful. Thank you. I'm still on the Alvar communities in the north end of the island here, and I just want to orient everybody to where we are. A lot of people don't even realize that Ohio has some islands in Lake Erie that it owns, but we're also pretty close to Canada. So if you look out in the direction I'm pointing, east, a little northeast of where I'm looking, that's toward the direction of Pelee Island, which is part of Canada. So that's one of the about the closest we get to Canada in this vicinity. But if you look out in this direction, okay, we have the continuation of some of the Lake Erie islands. That would include South Bass Island, and then kind of behind and more north of that would be Middle Bass Island. And I know this is going to be very difficult to see, but in the center of your view is the Admiral Perry Monument on South Bass Island near the community of Put-in-Bay, which is kind of like the party capital of Lake Erie for terms of Ohio. Over there on South Bass Island, Ohio State has a research and teaching lab called Stone Lab that students can go and do extended courses in the summer or during the year. And there's a facility there, or boats, and you do all things lake, essentially. So this is where we are. So Kelleys Island is the largest of Ohio's islands. Most of them are occupied with small villages. The permanent population of Kelleys Island is somewhere in the vicinity of 200 to 300 people. Of course, that swells in the summertime during the tourist season. The other islands are even smaller than that, but they do have permanent populations. The lake used to freeze regularly, but that is not a regular occurrence anymore because of global warming. And so you basically get between these islands on ferries, boats, or small airplanes. All of these little islands have a little airstrip. I think we'll visit Kelleys Island's airstrip here shortly. And I did take a little plane out of that once, just on a little quick trip from Kelleys to South Bass Island. And that was kind of fun. Fun in a scary, crazy way. All right, but that just orients you to where we are. The Admiral Perry Monument, by the way, is in honor of Admiral Perry, all right, who fought on Lake Erie against the British. And Admiral Perry coined a famous phrase that's actually misused. There's a common phrase that people say when you're kind of acknowledging your own failings. You say, I've seen the enemy and it is us. Okay, and that kind of means that you are your own worst enemy. But in fact, that stems from a phrase that Admiral Perry used when they were basically had lured the British ships into a no-win situation. And Admiral Perry said, "I've seen the enemy and they are ours," meaning we have them. All right, but that phrase got sort of changed around, switched around a little bit to have a whole other meaning, which is more commonly used today. So that's an impressive limestone monument. So if you ever get to South Bass Island, which I will not be on this trip, you have to visit Admiral Perry's monument. Okay, but this is just an extension of the Alvar communities. The island wraps around now toward the west, starts to face the west, and in the distance I actually see a power plant which is on the mainland. So, and we'll take a look at that side of the island later on today. Some large bird is approaching me, and I don't know what it is. It's a pheasant, I think. Sneaked in here. I don't know what that was. Huh, it was either a grouse or a pheasant. It was about the size of a pheasant. It was all brown, but it's hiding now. Well, that was interesting. I'll have to try to see what that was. I believe, however, it was a female pheasant. Female ring-necked pheasant. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and I've switched hats. I found that this hat actually keeps the bugs and the flies off of you better than just a regular trucker's cap, ball cap. So, you know, I wear a hat for whatever, you know, nature demands. So, this evening, I'm at North Pond Reserve on Kelleys Island, which is an embayment wetland, okay, which is a wetland that was formed as the formerly higher lake levels retreated and left behind a low-lying wet area that actually is still partly connected to the lake. And, you know, some water can come in and flow out and so forth, which is a really rare type of wetland around these Lake Erie Islands at this point. Okay, so let's take a look at North Pond Reserve. You start up near the, you know, the entrance, which I'm about 50 yards in from the entrance. I can see in this preserve there's been a lot of sort of maintenance in the area to remove probably invasives like honeysuckle and things like that. But we're going to descend down toward the wetland area through just a second growth woodland. And along the way here, we should be able to see the borders of the former lake when it was much higher. Okay, this would have been a couple thousand years ago, well after the glaciers retreated, water levels rose, and lake levels were actually much higher. In fact, that bank right there might really be what was indicated as the former lakeshore of Lake Erie at one point. I'm not sure, so we'll see if we see anything better than that. But this trail is a fairly short trail. You walk through these woods for a bit, and then you get into the formal wetland area, and it has a few observation towers. So let's just walk out there and see what we can see. So I've dropped down from that beginning part of the trail into a lower lying area that looks to be probably quite seasonally wet. A lot of lower vegetation here. I'm seeing a lot of black haw viburnum, and gray dogwood, mulberries, hackberries in terms of trees, and some remnant ashes, grapevines, giant poison ivies as well. I've seen some poison ivy shrubs back here the size of small trees. Pretty impressive. So at this point, this is just a mowed trail, and I think soon we'll get out into the wetland proper. So let's see about that. Okay, I see a little bench coming up. A lot of birds. Birds are busy. Seen lots of red-winged blackbirds. Okay, at this point, we're now going to enter the wetland proper. There's a boardwalk built of recycled plastic lumber. And we'll just see what we are able to see out here. Here's a cattail, by the way. That's a non-native, probably invasive cattail called narrow-leaf cattail. Okay, it's basically like our more common cattail, but skinnier all the way around. And that's thought to be non-native. So, I see some probably swamp roses and trumpet creepers blooming there in the distance. And here's Phragmites, these large canes you see to my right are Phragmites. That's a notorious wetland invader along the Great Lakes. And it looks like this area has actually been treated with herbicide, probably to try to knock that back. That's really a scourge along Lake Erie, all along Lake Erie. Yeah, I think last time I walked this trail, which was probably 10 years ago or more, I don't recall there being so much of that in here. But as you can see, it's a huge plant and it really, dominates. You can see how dense it is over in there. It just dominates the habitat. And so there's been a lot of efforts to try to get rid of that. And obviously those are last year's flowering stalks, and I'm not really seeing that much coming back. So there is some coming back, but that to me looks like it's been herbicided. Some of the things we want in here are button bushes, which we might see. There's willow in front of me there. Quite likely black willow. I've been hearing frogs. Here's buttonbush. Buttonbush is a wetland shrub. It actually can grow in standing water. You can see the reason for the name buttonbush. Nice glossy leaves. And again, below us, it is wet. It is permanently wet down there. Okay, so this is growing in some standing water. And that's a desirable native. But boy, yeah, I see this area got invaded quite a bit by Phragmites. Okay, so I'll keep walking, and there are a couple of towers. And I will, I think, join you on top of a tower unless I see anything else interesting to point out. All right, so we're approaching first of the observation towers. I believe there are two of them out here. There are little micro lily pads, spatterdock, things like that blooming. Let's see what we can see from the tower, the deck. Lots of birds. Red-winged blackbirds are trailing me the whole way, yelling at me. All right. Here's a nice view. So basically that direction is west. See, the sun's heading in that way, that direction. And it's much more wet out in that direction. And most of these shrubs that you're seeing out here are buttonbush. There's a willow again. Lots of these things I see have been cut back by beavers in time. Here's an area out there with more open water, more of a pond-like habitat. And of course this water is covered with duckweed, okay, one of our smallest flowering plants in the world. All right, so that green coating you're seeing on the wetland there is not algae in this case. It's duckweed, a little floating microplant, if you will. Oh, I see something coming here. I think we have an egret. You know, a big white bird in the distance. We have an egret. That's cool. I don't know how well we could see that from this distance. It's about 150 feet out there in front of me. Lots of dead cottonwoods here. I think they probably, it seems like it's wetter in here than it was. So it could be that these cottonwoods were drowned, more or less. Cottonwoods can handle wet soils and so forth, but they don't like to be in standing water that much unless they decided to knock them back on purpose. I don't know. All right, so I've got some deer flies after me. Oh, here comes the egret. We'll see if we can catch it in flight. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, that was fun. The blackbirds are mobbing it, chasing it away. All right, so let's continue on down the walk. Here's a close-up of trumpet vine. This is a native vining plant. Pollinators love it, hummingbirds love it. Okay, compound leaves here with these orange tubular flowers that, you know, hummingbirds basically target to stick their beaks down. So it's blooming all throughout the wetland here. Here's a kiosk that you encounter along the walk. Okay, hits some of the wildlife highlights. Some of the birds you might expect to see: thrushes, warblers, yellowthroats. I've been seeing towhees, chickadees, some warblers actually. A little bit about the plants. There's a rarer plant here called wapato. Okay, that's I don't know if it's flowering right now, but it's found here. And arrowheads. I'll point out arrowheads as we see them. Here's an arrowhead and painted. A little bit about reptiles, amphibians, and some birds, and barrier beach. So let's continue our journey in this direction. See what else we can see. There's a nice stand of live cottonwoods back there, which leads me to believe that they might have purposefully backed some of those down to keep this an open wetland habitat. That's just a guess. I don't know that to be true. Okay, but we're heading out toward the beach, I believe. And maybe we'll see this little a barrier beach out here and see where the wetland joins the lake. Essentially, this is it. We're climbing over a berm here. Out to a little quieter, a little bit more isolated beach. We're not too far from the state park, which is out in that direction. It's easy to walk back there from here. Okay, but this wetland occasionally, let's see, I think we're gonna hit the edge of private property over here. But occasionally this wetland, the water will break through and join the lake. And, but the sand berm builds up and sort of dams it up. in between those times. So let's see, I think that might happen down farther than we are able to go today. This is private property now, so we're not going to be able to see that exactly, but occasionally this berm will break open and have the wetland join the lake. This is a sandy beach now, as you can see, unlike the beaches we looked at earlier today that were very rocky with either lake stone or alvar. And this sort of stuff is made up of shell fragments, and a lot of these shell fragments are zebra mussel shells and other invasive mussels or clams. So that's a little bit of an unnatural shell line there, as you can see. But this is definitely a pleasant little stretch. There's no one along it here, well, for probably a quarter mile at least in that direction, and at least that far in that direction, maybe farther. So here's your view. Okay, when you look out in that direction, that's Canada, out in that direction. Okay, let's make our way back. There's a colony of this beautiful plant flowering right now, right at this sort of beach access point by North Pond Preserve. I will have to look that one up and identify it for you later. But it's flowering quite abundantly in this little access trail right now. And I don't know what it is, believe it or not. So that concludes my visit to North Pond. And I'm going to hit a couple more highlights before I conclude my tour of Kelleys Island with you. Before I leave North Pond, I want to leave you with a beautiful American elm growing right here near the entrance. Okay, a nice healthy tree. I examined this thing because I thought it might have been a species that occurs on Kelleys Island called rock elm, which I'd like to see. Is not one that I've identified myself. But if I find one, I'll let you know. But nonetheless, there's a beautiful American elm, nice and healthy here near the entrance to the trail. Okay, see you at the next site. All right, we're about to pass through the Kelleys Island airstrip. I'm driving, so this little street, Monaghan Road, crosses right across the extended runway. All right, so there's the back emergency section of the airport, and then here it is out here. Okay, it's a beautiful little runway. You take off right over the lake. I did fly out of here one time over to South Bass Island on a small little like 4-seater Cessna or some kind of plane like that. And it was a wild ride. Our pilot was having a little fun with us, I think, and sort of was banking hard and diving on the way. So, well, look at this. Right on cue, baby. I had no idea that thing was coming. I think it did not land because I was there, so I'll get out of its way. So there we go. Just some lake view, the south-facing view from Kelleys Island, back toward the mainland. Been coming to Kelleys Island for probably about 24 years, 23 or 24 years. And for the first several years that we had come here, there still were quarrying operations on the island. And I think those officially ended about probably 15 years ago or so. And I'm going to show you the last operation, both the open pit and also the conveyor where they took the limestone and out to the lake to be shipped back to the mainland. So this is what happens to an open pit after quarry operations cease. Those open pits fill with water. Okay, so out in that direction, it was the loading facility where they put the limestone onto conveyors, and it was conveyed out to the lakeshore where it was put into barges for shipping. Okay, and so the only reason quarry operations can operate is by pumping that water out as they operate. And as soon as they cease operating, quarries are like big bathtubs, stone-lined bathtubs, and they fill with water. It's actually pretty nice. You could do some serious cliff diving out there, but I can see this is still fenced. I'm sure that happens. But that's a pretty large quarry lake here in the middle of Kelleys Island. Here's the spot where the conveyor came out from the quarry, and basically there was a belt that ran on those rollers down there that conveyed the limestone, the crushed limestone, out to be loaded onto barges out there, okay, to head inland. And that was still under operation when we first started to come here. All right, well, after having my requisite walleye basket at West Bay Inn on the west side of Kelleys Island, I'm going to leave you with this view that everybody gathers to see at the end of the night in the summer. And that's the sunset, sun going down over South Bass Island. It's just a little bit to the left of the Admiral Perry Monument. All right, and with that as my backdrop, I'm going to bid you adieu for this episode of The Naturalist. Till next time, take care. Bye.